Hello, welcome to the channel Myths and Legends. In today's episode, we will continue our journey through Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy. This time, we will ascend the majestic mountain of Purgatory, where together with the characters, we will uncover the mysteries hidden on its steps. Prepare to see how souls are purified from sins, freeing themselves from the sufferings of hell. Let's begin. Leaving behind the torturous circles of hell, the travelers emerge onto the surface of the opposite hemisphere of the earth, through a narrow chasm. Dante was filled with joy, once again meeting the dawn and sunlight he had not seen for so long. However, their encounter with the guardian of Purgatory, Old Man Cato, was far from warm. Cato greeted the wanderers with distrust and sternly asked who they were and for what purpose they had come here. Virgil, wishing to win over the guard, explained the reason for their journey and sincerely mentioned Cato's wife, Marcia, hoping to awaken compassion in the guardian. After receiving permission to proceed, the travelers set off towards the seacoast on Cato's instructions to wash away the traces of hell and prepare for purification in Purgatory. In the distance, a small boat slowly approached across the sea, barely discernible on the horizon. As it came closer, the travelers were able to make out the passengers on board. An angel was steering this unusual vessel, and its passengers were none other than the souls of the deceased, not doomed to eternal torments of hell. These souls, purified from sins, were headed for Purgatory, and it was on this boat that our travelers were able to cross the waters and reach the opposite shore. Upon disembarking, Dante and his companions continued their journey to the foot of the majestic mountain of Purgatory. There, they encountered the souls of those who, realizing their sins on their deathbeds, managed to repent and avoid punishment in hell. These sinners, though not reaching the darkest depths of hell, still had to pass through Purgatory for complete purification. When night enveloped the skies, Dante was enchanted by the beauty of the night sky, adorned with three dazzlingly bright stars. These stars symbolize the three great virtues: faith, hope, and love. Unlike his companions, Virgil and the other shades who did not need rest, Dante, exhausted from the long journey, fell into a deep sleep. Upon waking, he was struck and alarmed. The sky was already flooded with bright sunlight, blinding his gaze, and before him stretched the endless sea. Virgil told him that while the poet was in a deep sleep, Saint Lucia appeared and transported him to the very threshold of Purgatory. Coming to his senses, Dante saw before him a tall rock. As he approached, he noticed 3 steps, each painted in its own special color. At the foot stood a guardian and angel who silently guarded the entrance. He appeared reclusive, as if sealed in time. As soon as the travelers approached him, he suddenly came to life. The angel began the ritual. He traced the letter G on Dante's and Virgil's foreheads 7 times, which symbolized sin, from the Italian peccato. These 7 marks represented the 7 deadly sins that needed to be atoned for. As they ascended to the top of the mountain, each letter would gradually disappear as the sin was forgiven. Purgatory itself consisted of various levels called circles, and each circle was dedicated to the atonement of a specific sin. In the very first circle were those who in life were consumed by pride. Here, in the burdensome atmosphere of humility, monuments were erected celebrating modesty, and the sinners were reminded of the futility of their pride. Heavy stone slabs pressed down on their backs, bending them under the weight, yet they could not free themselves. However, despite the pain and suffering, these souls still sang praises to the Lord and prayed that the living on earth would not repeat their mistakes and would turn to the true path. Among those atoning for the sin of pride was the artist Atticus. In life, he was captivated by his own fame, proud of his achievements and the admiration of those around him. Now, realizing his folly, he understood that there was nothing to be proud of, for in the face of death, all are equal. This revelation came to him only here in Purgatory, where each sinner faced the true value of humility. Having completed their journey in the first circle of Purgatory, Dante and Virgil were ready to continue their ascent. When they reached the second circle, an angel approached them and wiped the first letter G from Dante's forehead, symbolizing his release from the sin of pride. Dante was now 1 step closer to the purification of his soul. In the second circle, they encountered the souls of those who suffered from the sin of envy. Their punishment was tied to the fact that in life they envied everything they saw with their eyes. Now their eyes were closed symbolically, they were blinded so that they could no longer see and envy others. Among the envious was even the first of them, Cain, who, according to tradition, still remained here paying for his eternal envy. Perplexed and concerned, Dante turned to Virgil with a question about whether some souls would never be able to leave Purgatory. With sadness, Virgil explained that indeed there are souls destined for eternal stay here, as their sins are so deep that atonement is impossible. Having finished their journey in the second circle, the travelers again met the angel. He wiped the second letter from Dante's forehead, marking that he had been freed from the sin of envy and was ready to move further toward the summit of the mountain. In the third circle of Purgatory, a horrifying scene unfolded before the travelers. They saw an enraged crowd throwing stones at a young man, symbolizing uncontrolled fury and malice. This circle was intended for those whose souls were poisoned by anger. Here, the atmosphere seemed darker and more oppressive than in the deepest and darkest corners of hell. Dark smoke, thick as night, enveloped everything around, blinding the travelers and depriving them of the ability to see clearly. This was not merely punishment but a lesson in humility and meekness for those who succumb to fits of anger in life. Suddenly, Dante felt a light touch of an angelic wing against his forehead. At that moment, the third letter, symbolizing anger, disappeared from his brow, signifying that he had been cleansed of this sin. After this, the travelers continued their ascent and reached the fourth circle of Purgatory, where the purification of the lazy took place. Here, the atonement occurred in contrast to their earthly lives. Those who had suffered from laziness in life were forced to run constantly. Their punishment consisted of eternal haste, a reminder of how little they had accomplished in their lives. This circle was dedicated to the activity and effort they had avoided, and now they were compelled to act without pause. For inspiration, they were given examples of outstanding figures. One was the Virgin Mary, and the other was Caesar, known for his decisiveness and speed of action. The lazy rushed past the travelers with incredible speed, disappearing around the bend of the mountain, continuing their endless run in hopes of cleansing themselves of their sin. Next, the travelers continued their ascent and reached the fifth circle, where the miserly and the spendthrifts were atoning. Misery, greed, and avarice regarding material goods are the vices that receive their deserved punishment here. The misers, obsessed with the thirst for wealth, suffered a cruel punishment. Molten gold was poured down their throats, symbolizing their insatiable greed in life. As soon as the travelers entered this circle, the ground suddenly shook with a strong earthquake. Soon it became clear that this was not a random catastrophe, but a joyful sign, nature rejoicing at the purification of the soul of the Roman poet Statius. His soul had finally achieved complete purification and was ready to ascend to paradise, where he was to go along with Dante and Virgil. Statius was one of those who atoned for his sins in the fifth circle, but unlike the misers, he suffered from the opposite extreme, profligacy. He was unable to restrain himself in his spending, but in purgatory, these extremes, miserliness and profligacy, are purified equally, as both vices are connected to an improper attitude toward material wealth. After meeting with Statius, the angel, as before, approached Dante and wiped another letter from his brow, symbolizing his release from the sin of miserly behavior. Freed from this sin, the travelers continued on their way and transitioned to the sixth circle of Purgatory, where the glutton suffered. Here, those who had indulged in excesses of food and drink in life suffered from eternal hunger and thirst, unable to satisfy their needs. This punishment was a harsh reversal of their former greed for food. In the sixth circle of Purgatory, the souls of the gluttons atone for their sins through complete deprivation of food. Their bodies are so emaciated here that only skin and bones remain. Dante, observing this, pondered, how can it be that shadows, which are essentially incorporeal, have become so thin? After all, as shadows, they should not experience hunger like living beings. Virgil, seeing Dante's confusion, explained that even shadows, despite their incorporeality, retain the shape of the bodies they represented in life. In purgatory, their appearance is subject to the same laws as in real life, and here, just like the living, they would lose flesh without food, which is why their shadows replicate this process. Soon, the angel approached the travelers again and wiped the sixth letter from Dante's brow, symbolizing his release from the sin of gluttony. With this purification, they ascended to the seventh step of the mountain of Purgatory. In the seventh circle, they were met with a terrifying sight here. Adulterers and lustful individuals were atoning for their sins in flames of fire. They burned, yet at the same time sang hymns of praise, exalting examples of restraint and chastity that served as lessons for them. The fire was not only a punishment but also a means of purification for these souls. The lustful were divided into two groups. One consisted of those who indulged in same-sex relationships, while the other was made up of those who excessively pursued opposite-sex connections, knowing no bounds in their desire. Among these souls were notable figures the poet Guido Veneziano and the Provencal poet Arnaut, who, like the others, were atoning for their sins while awaiting complete purification. The path to the earthly paradise proved to be more challenging than the travelers had expected. A wall of fire separated them from their goal, its flames seeming insurmountable. Dante was filled with fear at this barrier, but his guides Virgil and Statius assured him that just beyond this fire lay the long-awaited path to Beatrice, to the earthly paradise located at the very top of the mountain of Purgatory. They convinced him that passing through the flames was necessary to achieve purification and meet his beloved. Gathering their courage, all three, Dante, Virgil, and Statius, stepped resolutely into the fire. The flames enveloped them, but they stood firm and emerged on the other side, even closer to their goal. After this difficult trial, the travelers decided to take a moment to rest, preparing for the final stage of their journey. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Your support is incredibly important to us, so don't forget to like if you enjoyed it and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new episodes. Also, hit the bell icon to always stay updated. You were watching Myths and Legends. All the best and see you next time.